What's up, everybody? This is Adam from Polyform Studio, and this is Product Lab, the show that explores the product strategies of startups through interviews, experiences, and stories with the founders.
Today, we're joined by Greta McAnany. She's a startup founder in the youth mental health and wellness space with more than 10 years of experience. She's focusing her time building awareness and solutions at the intersection of mental health, well-being, media, and tech.
Great to have you here, Greta. It's been too long. Real pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm so excited to be here. Again, I wish I had done like the full body casual shot on the couch, but next time I'll look.
Next episode.
This is great. This is great.
I'll try.
So your startup, Blue Fever, let's have it. What's the elevator pitch? What's it all about?
Yeah. So Blue Fever is a new type of social well-being platform for young people, so teens and young adults, that provides a bridge between their self-reported needs around mental health and wellness, and bridges them to resources that can best support them. So think services, products, could be content, people, and we do this all in our app, which Polyform helped design the first version of, which is this high-trust community diary where authentic self-expression unlocks peer support. And our empathetic AI serves resources based on, contextual messages and resources for your well-being.
Love it. That was well practiced for sure, and a well-needed product. I think this is something that drew us together in the early days of Blue Fever, was that it was really a topic. Obviously, you and the whole team are super passionate about. We're also passionate about that space, mental wellness, mental health, helping young people out, trying to maybe repair some of the damage done by the tech world. We spoke a little bit just before we started about things changing in the world of designing for young people, especially. One of the big questions I think we're super interested in. From your point of view, how do you think designing for young people and teens and building products for them is different from other products?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a huge question. I could probably talk for 5 hours on that topic, but I'll try to collect my thoughts. I think that what's really important is when you're designing for any end user, you have to think about what is their context, right? And the context of young people, and we could say Gen Z is the young hot generation now, but Gen Alpha is following quickly behind them. Is that Gen Z is the first generation to grow up with not only a physical self like we did, but also a digital self. And so that is I think one of the biggest differences when you're designing for young people is understanding that is a big shift in context, when you have a life out here and then you have a life in your phone as well. And I think context is also understanding how they interact with the world and what's happening in the world. And so young people are growing up with this phone in their hand. They're also growing up in the midst of a global pandemic, social isolation, climate change, shifts in the economy. All of these things shape their context and how they use technology. And they actually have the lowest rates of trust in institutions and the highest rates of skepticism. So when you are building for young people, you have to understand their context and why authenticity and safety and trust and data privacy are all so important to them. So I'll stop myself there. That's just kind of at a high level. I think context is really important.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, you nailed it, right? Context, so important. I want to go into your context a little bit. You have a really interesting background, the journey to get from, where you started to the version of Blue Fever now. I'd love to just dive into that a bunch. Where did it all start?
I'll kind of summarize my journey before Blue Fever was really, being an entrepreneur just in a different sector, but focused on youth mental health and wellness, right at the intersection of media, technology, or involved media and technology. So, Blue Fever initially launched, before we learned our lesson, as an SVOD platform. This is a deep cut, an SVOD platform for millennial women. I'm a middle-aged millennial. And so we're like, oh, we're going to make this like ASVOD platform. And initially like we spun it up on a Squarespace page and
Nice.
like deep linked YouTube videos. Like it was very hacky. And we pitched, I think like probably like 150 investors before we got our first yes. And then after that first yes, we ended up getting into Techstars, Techstars LA. And in that program, you know, it's a short program, but in that 3-month program, we went from being these media founders to being, you know, tech founders and you know, very early stage tech founders, but tech founders nonetheless. And we went, oh, okay, like this is the field we're playing in. And in that 3 months, we tested text message, SMS, as a marketing channel for this SVOD platform because we had an email list of like 1,500 people. And we started text messaging, and I taught myself like Facebook ads because people were still on Facebook back then, like Facebook and Instagram ads. And then we saw that people started responding in text message, like in our marketing channel. And people like, we'd send a text out, it's like, hey, like, are you stressed right now? Like, watch this video. And people would write back and be like, oh my God, how did you know? Like, how'd you know that?
Wow.
And I'm
No
like,
way.
we are all stressed. Like everybody, you know, it's like maybe not for the same reason as you, but like, you know, emotions our feelings are specific but not unique. And
Mhm.
so we were like, oh, this is interesting. So we started like manually texting back. And then like we just grew and we kept texting and texting and texting, and we reached like 10,000 people in a month. And we were like, whoa, there's something here. And then we graduated Techstars and we grew our audience to about 30,000 people. And our age demo had dropped from millennial women to Gen Z. And
Interesting.
we're like texting manually, like up till 2 a.m. because neither of us
Wow.
had tech backgrounds. And we're just like, okay, something's here. We don't know what it is. And we, at 30,000 users, eventually started to like build out a very simple call and response chatbot. And then obviously things got more scalable because the chatbot did responding, and we gave people kind of options to kind of choose their own adventure. And then from there ended up building out over 250,000 emotional pathways
Oh my
for
gosh.
people to choose their own adventure within the text message platform. And really it was this bot that named Blue, who talked to you like a big sibling would, and guided you like a big sibling would, and guided you to kind of choose this adventure. So that if you started off like feeling bad or meh or whatever, or even if you're feeling good, you get to a piece of content at the end that felt like it met you where you were, and supported you. And then we raised a seed round. We kept growing, and we kept building out, learning and building out all these pathways. But about, you know, in the first year, kind of after we raised our seed round, we were like, how are we going to monetize, right? If you're taking VC money, you need to understand how you're going to monetize. And we were like, well, we've built this like incredible space where our users are telling us like, wow, like Blue feels like Blue cares about me more than my friends do. I know that Blue's made by real people. Like, it's not like Wikipedia. Like, one girl was like, it's not like Wikipedia. Those aren't real people, but Blue's real people. And I'd be like, well, I think Wikipedia is real people too, but like maybe not as real as us. And and we just got such positive feedback on the product, but we were seeing that like the users who are engaging most were typically engaging in more crisis situations and needed more extra mental health support. And we'd of course route them to that support, but we were also like, okay, like we'll test some monetization opportunities and maybe offer products and services. And we saw amazing click-through rates and adoption rates, but we just felt far too limited by text message because it's such a linear platform.
Yeah.
And as a user, you can't see what you can do, right? And we kept on building out our like guide of how to use it, but it just like became unruly. And about that point, we were like, we got to build an app. And we were like, we don't know how to build an app. And then we were introduced to you by a good friend, and you'd built many apps before. And we were like, hey, so like we have this text message platform, and we have some learnings, but we got to figure out how to translate this into an entirely new experience that our users are going to like. And I don't remember if we had these pillars at the time when we worked with you, but what we pulled away from our text message platform were all of our learnings boiled down to 3 core pillars of the app now, which is safe self-expression, social support, and positive guidance. That were like, those are the 3 things that our users want. And so how do we create that in an app? So I'm gonna stop there, and then that's the SMS chapter, and then we can move on to the app chapter. But that's where we are now.
That's an incredible journey. You touch on so many good things there. You know, it's a long story, it's a big story, it's a windy story, but I think it's so important. I feel like every time we have a founder on the podcast, the story of how they got there isn't what people would think, and it's always full of pivots and different you know, it started as this thing, it ended. I think it's so good to talk about that and expose that, because a lot of people from the outside looking in think a great idea just like comes fully formed, and
that's right. Yeah.
you know, the MVP is just kind of, you
The
know,
final thing.
one or two versions from the final thing. Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
I wish.
It's so different.
Tell me who their product person is, like, or their designer.
Exactly.
Love to work with them if they could get there that quickly. I mean, Adam, I think you make a great point. Like, it always takes longer than you think it will. And what you start off with is, I think, an intuition around this maybe unseen, unmet need of a user, but you really have to test and fail before you understand what the expression of that unseen, unmet need is.
Yeah, that's great advice. You know, before we go into the present, I want to touch on a couple great things you mentioned there, like one being Techstars, you know, going through accelerators, that kind of whole ecosystem. If you are a first-time founder now, knowing what you do, would you recommend?
Yeah. I will say Techstars was life-changing for us. And we've actually been through 2 accelerators. Both Techstars accelerators, funny enough, and I'm not sure if you know this, but we went through our first Techstars. I like to say that Techstars accelerators find us when we most need them,
ironically. So we really needed them at the beginning. And I think that what an accelerator can do for especially a first-time founder is that it does like 2 to 3 big things. One, it teaches you the ropes around being a tech founder, right? Just like the basics. And you don't master it all, right? But you kind of like learn the language. You learn what you should be doing, even if you don't really continue doing that, right? And you build this tremendous network, which specifically Techstars prides itself on. I think a lot of accelerators, but you build this network that's really powerful. And then like the third thing is, I don't know if it's talked about as much, but I think was really life-changing for myself and for Blue Fever is you build this powerful support group within the founders that you went through the class, the accelerator with.
Right.
So one of the founders I went through the first Techstars with introduced me to you, right? Like, I was like, hey, I need this designer. Like, I wouldn't have met Brian. Shout out Brian. Like, if we hadn't gone through Techstars together and developed, you know, this deep bond and being in the trenches. And I think that oftentimes founders from that Techstars class, like a lot of us are still in touch. And when I have really challenging questions that aren't like Googleable, like I call them, right? And that's really powerful that we kind of got this community from that. Because when you're a founder, it's a lonely road, and it's really helpful to be around people who understand the experience. So I think I'd say like just learning the ropes, the full network, and then community support is amazing if you're starting out.
Amazing. Yeah. You've got such a great community behind you too. Something else I wanted to kind of backtrack to there was when you talked about your seed round. You know, you've got these amazing envy-worthy investors with Bumble and the Amazon Alexa Fund, Serena Williams and stuff. My God. What advice would you give to first-time founders, you know, looking to make those kind of excellent partners?
Yeah. Well, to kind of connect that we're just talking about with this question is that the Amazon investment actually came from Techstars Accelerator. So Techstars partnered with the Amazon Alexa Fund, and so that was the second accelerator.
Nice.
That Techstars like led that and actually led that when we were during 2020, right, when we were like building the app with you all. So I think that, you know, a lot of founders ask me this question, is like, well, how did you connect with these people? And I think the answer is I have always tried to put relationships first, right? And then those relationships lead to other relationships, right? Which leads to other opportunities. And when you're a founder, your job is to go out and build the strongest network that you can to support this really big boulder you're pushing up a hill. And, you know, especially as, you know, an early stage founder, you're doing lots of hard things. Like you're hiring, you're trying to get investment, and those are all people things. Like you have to, good people typically find good people. And so with Serena and Bumble, I had met with the GP over at Serena Ventures, I think it was like in fall 2019. And, you know, she was like, we're not a fit for your round now. And we were like, okay, I think we were raising on our text message product. And then when we were like, you know, she and I kind of stayed in touch, we maintained a friendship, but she had said no. But I still was like, I didn't say, okay, screw you. Like, I'm never going to talk to you again. I was like, we should, you know, I really like you as a person. We should still be friends. And then the pandemic hit in 2020 and she checked in and I was like, yeah, we're building an app. And she's like, are you raising money? Like, that sounds like something we'd invest in. And it was like, okay. And then she's like, also, like, you should talk to Bumble. I was like, okay. And then I got an email from somebody in the Techstars community that was like, hey, like, Amazon's running this accelerator. And at first I was like, we do not need another accelerator. But I was like, but it's the Amazon Alexa Fund. That's super interesting. And they ended up taking like later stage companies. It wasn't the same kind of equity deal. So they came in at your terms. And so I was like, oh, I'll take the call. And I think that like I've just always taken the call, even if I didn't know where it was going to lead, or I've like maintained the relationship. Because if somebody's like a cool or interesting, smart person, they're probably going to end up doing cool, interesting, smart things. Regardless, you know, like over time. And so when I look at the relationships I've built for Blue Fever, some have ended in great investors, right? Some have ended in great hires, collaborators, but ultimately, like I think that those will be fruitful even beyond my time at Blue Fever, or at least I hope they will, because those people go on to do cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a people business, right?
Dude.
Some good advice there for sure.
Yo,
yeah, and Adam, you're really good at that. I have to say, like, big
I
shout
know
out.
he's such a. Oh,
Adam
yeah.
is like the most people person. I'm like, do you just like, are you up 24 hours like sending LinkedIn messages and posting and congratulating people and like, you feel like I look up to you when it comes to that. And I think that for founders, they're like, I don't know where to start, right? I don't have a network, but I think that getting into an accelerator or some kind of community for founders, for startups, like that, you start there and then it kind of like builds out. And you can also do that online. And so I think that like even if you don't have a network as an early stage founder, you can build one. Like I literally had no network and then was able to get those investors on board. And we've also brought on since then one of the co-founders of SoulCycle as one of our investors too. Like
awesome.
It's but again, it's that person, I hunted her down. She actually just launched another company that's in the same mental wellness space, but I was like, I need to talk to her. And so I just was like, who am I connected to? And eventually hunted her down, became her friend. And she didn't invest until like probably a year after we were like kind of friends. So again, it's time and
a
energy.
long haul. Yeah. It's like investing, right? You like invest in the relationships, and like even if it doesn't pay off right away, like later down the road, you'll see something come in from it.
Absolutely.
Oh no, I was just likening like the up all night like on LinkedIn thing to like you guys doing like the text messaging on like the first version, right? Like no one's gonna respond except me, so I gotta be here till like 2 a.m.
Founder stuff,
yeah.
Up late.
Founder stuff, just hustling.
Well, I got something actually. I want to take the spotlight back to product actually, because we talked about like the first version of Blue Fever, and then we got up to like where we were about to build an app, and then kind of like kiboshed the conversation.
Yeah,
but I think there's something really interesting there with like even like a product like Blue Fever that's gone through so many like incarnations or like iterations before we kind of found what we were doing. It seems like we were kind of like tackling the same problem all along the way, right? But how do you know when to pivot? Like, how did you guys know that, like, listen, SMS isn't going to cut it for us. We need to like go to the next thing. Or like X Factor wasn't cutting it for us. We need to go down like the text message route, right?
Yeah. I think there's many reasons that you pivot. The first two that come to mind are either you feel this like pull towards product market fit. So with our moving from that like Squarespace SVOD platform to text message, like we saw that like we grew, exponentially from like we had 0 text message subscribers, right? So we went from 0 to 10,000 in about a month. So that's something to pay attention to, right?
Yes.
And if people are using that product, I think then it gives you a reason to step back and go, okay, there's something here. We need to dive into it more. So I think that's one reason to pivot. When you see something unexpected is working, like you can't, a lot of founders, I think are really precious about, what they think the end product should look like. But really at the end of the day, the users need to tell you what the end product should be. So we never set out to start a text message platform, but like that's what people wanted. So we went, okay, I guess we're doing that now, and we've got to learn about the world of text message, and so I think it's being user led and user obsessed or customer obsessed, right? And like following like them. And so that first pivot was really user led. The second pivot to an app was really more business led. I think it was partially user led, and partially business led. So, we had feedback from users that they loved how they could talk to Blue very openly without judgment. So that's that pillar of safe self-expression. They loved how Blue guided them to what they needed based on how they felt. So that's positive guidance. But what they were always asking for is a more social component to Blue Fever. They were always like, can me and my friend in Blue text? And we were like, we don't know how to technically do that. That's really challenging. And then we did a couple of tests of like, what would happen if we like made this more social, and we saw engagement go up. So that was like one reason to pivot. But then from a company level perspective, we knew that if we monetized, and really the only way that was gonna work at work, if we monetize via, this like ads network and SMS, we knew that we would erode trust, because at the end of the day, we would be like hawking links to people. And so we went, okay, if we erode trust, then we lose users, then we don't have a company. So we need to figure out a new space where you can engage users and give them this amazing experience, but also monetize and maintain trust. And so that pulled us, that plus users wanting a more social experience, that pulled us into building an app.
Into the app.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Just another example of, the windy path. Listening to the users, I think, is something you and Blue Fever have done so well, right?
Yeah.
And Blue Fever at its core is this kind of community centric product. What advice would you give to a founder who wants to get their users more involved in the process of making the solution?
One, you should absolutely do it. Every founder should do that.
Yeah.
One of our early investors was a growth lead at Snapchat, and has since gone on to become like a legend in like the crypto space, et cetera. And he's a super smart guy. And I remember him telling us in the very early days, he's like, while you're small and while you have a small user base, get on the phone with them. Like literally get on the phone. People weren't Zooming that much back then. Like get on the phone, ask them questions, and kind of, really dive in a very rich way, because it's going to be harder for you to do that as you scale, right? You want as much time, harder to get people on the phone. And he's like, and I will never forget that. And I think that has served us really well, is like when you're really small, try to get people on a Zoom, try to get people on a call and have a conversation with them, and just be very open and honest about what you're trying to build, and ask them what they think, right? Ask them what their experience has been. Ask them questions what their opinion is on that, what they feel like they need right now. And then as you grow, you need to build more process into that, right? So like you always want to have user feedback. So maybe you start with these like ad hoc calls, but then is there a way you can get them all on like a Discord channel, like, and start to have a way that you can more asynchronously get feedback? Or maybe your users like ours, like really love surveys. Our community is I'm sure you guys remember that, we're such a survey community. They love to fill them out. And we've started, testing into revenue and I, obviously, like, we think a lot about maintaining trust while we do that. And I was like, I should just like run a survey and see, like, would people take a recommendation from Blue Fever? And then I said, oh, I wonder if people already have. And in the survey, 80% of people were like, yeah, I've already taken a recommendation. And Blue Fever has only recommended like content in the space, right? And users, not like products or services or anything outside of, our organic ecosystem. And I went, whoa. So people are like taking recommendations from others. This isn't that foreign of a concept. So we can like, so I think it's start by like, if you can go out to your users like for coffee, for lunch, like you're going to build these like loyal fans of your product, and they're going to want to co-create with you. Like start building that community and then put into place mechanisms that you can get that community to be larger and larger, and that they can connect with each other and get excited.
Makes total sense, especially for like the early days where you're able to like get these people on the phone and have like kind of like a one-on-one. But like now that you guys are established, you're this huge thing, Greta doesn't have time to be calling, user 1, 2, 3. So how does the collaboration kind of go today? Is it just like listening, looking at analytics that's going on in the tool right now, or is there another?
Yeah. So I think that, we look at both qualitative and quantitative feedback, right? So the qualitative feedback, I am not as deep in the trenches as my designer is, or my product manager, or my head of community. So I will say that I am more removed, but what they do is, we have a Discord channel, for our beta testers that they can go to, right? And we have, opportunities for people to sign up for that, like within the app, and like give direct feedback. We also get a lot of feedback over email, oddly enough, of people being like, hey, I like this about the app, or can we do that? Or this would be better if. So I think it's just, you have to give people opportunity to give feedback in the way they feel comfortable. So some people are going to do that via email. Some people are going to want to be part of this like side community. Some people are going to want to do it ad hoc in the app, but you just give them the opportunity to do it. I think is like the most important thing. And then I'll say for myself, like I don't, I am not doing as many user calls, but I have a lot of teens in my life, like through family and family friends. And you better believe like I'm texting and FaceTiming with them, and like, making sure that our relation stays strong because I love them. But also I'm like, what do you think about this? Or like, what do you think about that? Or what are you doing now? Or, how do you blah, blah, blah with your friends? And I really try to listen to all the teens and young adults in my life. So maybe it's not formal, but most of them use Blue Fever. And so I'll also ask them about their experience. And but my team does more of like the formalized stuff, but I'm just always like, can I ask you a question? To people that I meet.
I think that's like a real highlight on the difference between companies who build successfully for young people and the ones who build unsuccessfully for young people, is that like I've met a lot of founders building, tools for Gen Z who don't listen to Gen Z and don't talk to them and don't interact with even the ones in your family like you described, and they make a lot of assumptions that turn out not to be true.
Yeah.
And I think you could say the same for like any demographic or niche that you're building for, that you need to really get in there and be a part of that community to understand what serves them best and let them tell you, because they know better than anybody what they want, right?
Dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's instead of like me building this for you, it's me building it with you, right?
Oh,
like,
that's such a great
like,
way to frame it. Yeah,
it's that's the difference. And I think building with youth, I think that's crucial, but building with anybody, right? It's going to be better if you build with somebody than just for them and making assumptions about their experience. I mean, unless you are the core consumer, maybe there's wiggle room, but you still need other people's feedback. But
right.
building with somebody is so much more powerful. And we live in an age now where everybody wants to give their 2 cents, right? And, like we've got all of these different community platforms. And if I could go back and do things a little bit differently, what I probably would have done, an SMS was it was a more expensive way to do it. But like if I was a first-time founder today, and I wanted to build a community product, I would start and build that community in a space that was free for me to build that community, whether it's an email list, Reddit, Facebook group, whatever is most natural to that demographic. And then I'd build that community there. I'd really understand them. And then based on their actions, based on their needs, then I would go take that information and build a product.
That's amazing advice. This is something we've been like really pushing on startups lately, is that like if we're meeting them at the point where they have like some capital and an idea, we're like, okay, great, we can start some things. Step number 1, make a Discord or something and start getting these people together talking about this topic. Because it's that's where that it's like user research on steroids. Like walking people through prototypes and stuff is great, but having a community of engaged people around this topic and this problem and this solution, giving their input, it couldn't be more valuable.
It's true.
Yeah, and odds are your assumptions are wrong, right? Like we all know that adage of like assumptions make an ass out of you and me. Or maybe we don't. I don't know. My mom said that. But I think that it's like, like you build that for, even if you have capital, because you have capital, I mean, wonderful, especially in this market. You have capital, amazing, but like be really smart about how you spend that. Learn, fail for free in these other spaces. And then once you have a very clear idea of what you need to build, then you go to Polyform, you take your capital and you go, we're going to build these things and we are going to spend our capital smartly.
We're cutting that out. That's cut. That's a wrap. Ad. I appreciate the shout out. Appreciate the shout out. You said something there I want to rewind to real quick, was that if I could go back and do it all before, and earlier you talked about you didn't think you'd ever get into tech and you didn't have any kind of network or anything. What would you say to a young Greta, a young woman trying to get into the startup world now? Things are different than they were, but they're also a lot the same. What's some great advice that you would impart on young Greta?
Younger Greta was building a product for her teenage self, right? So she was building like big sibling technology that she wanted. I think that a younger version of myself, especially a founder who's considered a minority founder, right? I think that what I would say is that nobody knows anything. You actually know more than you think you do. Lead with confidence, lead with bravery and humility, and like it'll all work out how it's supposed to. I know that maybe it's cheesy, but I think that I went in with a lot of imposter syndrome and thinking like, oh, it should be done this way, right? Like you were saying at the top of the podcast, like we just hear the unicorn stories, right? Or like someone announces their seed round or their Series A and you think, wow, what a smooth ride to get there. But I would also tell my younger self, like building for loneliness and connection is really hard. What you are doing is hard. And so if it feels hard, it's okay, it should. And also if you have to pivot a lot, like that's because it's hard and nobody's really figured this out yet. So if it feels like it's too hard, go do something else. But this problem is what this problem is, and you chose to work on it. But I think I'd also tell my young self, because I think I think I had like I don't know, just like I had this like misbelief that we were just kind of another tech company building another kind of social network or this or that, and like what we're trying to solve for something like much harder. It's like human connection and loneliness. It's like and human like personal growth. That's like a very challenging thing to solve for and build like a tech product for.
and
Yeah.
we appreciate you doing the hard work
well,
because the world
absolutely.
needs more blue fevers.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
More people willing to take on those hard challenges.
More champions of good, like Greta, for example.
Don't
So,
cut that. Leave that.
Yeah, that's staying. Don't worry. So like this also, not necessarily people who are looking to get into tech, but the first time founders, right? Like Greta,
Yeah.
I know that productivity, things like time management are super important for somebody in a position like you. What do you think is an area that like first time founders, people who you kind of rub shoulders with or had way back, they often neglect? Like what's something that you see as being so important, but like nobody seems to be spending time or giving it face?
Yeah. So I actually have a very small coaching practice. So I work with a lot of I work with some early stage founders, and one thing that I noticed that I did and that my clients do is like everybody, like the tech industry, there's this like energy or like a group agreement that we're all like, we're gonna move fast. We gotta move fast. We gotta move fast. We gotta be like super productive. And oftentimes, like, we're in a day, or earlier stage founders are like, look at all this stuff I got done, but they don't really step back and say, like, well, did I do the one thing that would move my company forward today? Or did I just do a bunch of random stuff that, like, kind of helps, right? It's this skill of prioritization and strategy. It's like where prioritization and strategy come together. We're like, oh, okay, like if I think about the most important thing that the company needs right now, maybe it's like, getting this app out on time, or maybe it's raising a round. And I don't go do that one, I don't go do that one thing today that will help me meet my like weekly goal. And usually I'll set, weekly goals, monthly goals. I use an OKR system, which I can talk about more, but really understanding like, what's that one thing? And just being okay with getting that one thing done. Because I think oftentimes we want to feel like we did so much, because as founders, there's just like an endless amount of work to do.
Totally.
And you end up burning yourself out that way and being not productive. Like, you don't actually get your company where you need to go. And then you're like, I'm so tired. I've been working so much. It's like, but have you been effective?
Yeah.
I heard a quote once that was something to the tune of busy is the enemy of productive.
Wow.
And that really struck a chord with me, because I often still have these endless to-do lists. I now, like you, prioritize the items on the list. And there's some that if they never got done, it'll be fine. And other ones that if they don't get done, my business will end.
Yeah.
So it's
Totally.
it's very important to know which ones those are and put your time into the right buckets,
sure.
right?
Yeah. There's a great notebook that I use. It's called the Productivity Notebook, and it actually helps you like plan your week and like here are the top 5 things I need to get done, and if only when I finish these can I get to the next 5 things that are like less important. And it's really helpful. It's a tool that I've used. It's been really great, and I recommend it for people. Buy it on Amazon.
We'll drop the link below.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with it, right? But it's a process. But I used to have this pattern where like I'd set out this unrealistic to-do list for the day, wouldn't get it done. I would go to sleep feeling behind, and I'd have this like expectation hangover, right? Of like what I thought I should have gotten done. But in reality, it wasn't nearly as productive or realistic. And then I'd wake up the next morning and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm like so behind. And that energy is so toxic to live in, because you're never going to get anything done if you're always telling yourself I'm behind, right? And your energy will just be drained.
To bed dissatisfied and you wake up frantic. It's just not good energy. Totally been there myself. Working on it.
And I think it's a journey. Like nobody kind of clicks into that overnight, but like if you can be aware at least when you do it and try to go, okay, let me course correct, I think that's going to make you more productive as a founder and your company more successful, because you're steering the ship.
Yeah, this is a great point. I think some great advice there for any founders. I'm gonna switch the pace a bit into some rapid fire questions, because
these are the best ones.
Super relevant to what we were just talking about. Being a founder, super stressful life. How do you de-stress?
Oh.
So I take Saturdays fully off. Like I just am like, I'm not doing any work on Saturdays. And it's like, I happen to be Jewish, and I don't think this was intentional, but from kind of sundown on Friday to Sunday, so not sundown on Saturday, which would be the Jewish Sabbath, I'm just like, nope, it's me time. And I don't like to make plans over the weekend because my week is so planned. So like that's how I de-stress, is just like releasing myself from all ties.
That's a good one.
Wow. Yeah. Total me time.
Guilt-free day off.
All right. I got one for you. Greta, number one, book on podcast. Chill. Everybody chill. Number one book on product or startups.
Yeah. Well, the book that I was actually going to mention earlier, that is not a book about startups, but I think it's really powerful for startup people to think about. I think it's called Give First, I believe. Or I'll find the title of it, but it's basically research that's been done. Okay, I have two books. It's research that's been done that shows that they looked at givers, takers, and people who are in the middle, and kind of who is the most successful over time. And givers were the most successful as long as they didn't like overgive. So give first, guys. And then the one of the most impactful startup books I've read is The Culture Code. Every founder needs to read it. It's also based on research that looked at the most high performing teams across industry. So like the San Antonio Spurs in basketball, Pixar in animation, Citizens Brigade and improv. And the one ingredient that all of these teams had, Navy SEALs, the one ingredient that made them more successful than their peers was vulnerability. And it's a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it. And it's just a really powerful book that if you're trying to build a team or lead a team, there's some great practical advice, but it literally pinpoints, leaders across industries and the tactics and behaviors they encourage. Because when you're building something in the beginning, it might just be you and your co-founder and like an intern, but eventually you're going to grow a team. And so your job then becomes like, how do I get this group to move in a direction and create work product, right? And vulnerability is actually the key to that.
Amazing.
That's great insight. Oh my gosh.
That's a really good one. Okay, so aside from Techstars, we spoke a lot about Techstars. We know they're amazing. What is one other place, person, piece of media that you feel like you learn the most about being a founder?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I mean, my first jumps to, and this is probably not something that everybody has access to, but the first thing that jumps in my mind is like working with a coach. I highly recommend everybody works with a coach. Like my coach taught me how to be a good founder and a good leader, right? I also think the Masters of Scale podcast is really powerful. I mean, you hear from people who've like mastered scale, but those are really great insights as well. But I definitely say like my coaches that I worked with who have been founders themselves, that has been life-changing for me.
Yeah, that's great. You might have just answered one of our other questions, which is, what's your top podcast?
Oh yeah. Was it Masters of Scale?
I love, I love Masters of Scale. I'm a really, really big fan of that. I also, I mean, this is an old one, but like My Favorite Murder, nothing to do with startups, but I love My Favorite Murder. I've seen them live on Halloween, like record an episode. Like they're just great. Love My Favorite Murder.
That's
amazing.
Yo. Okay, so we got podcast, we talked books. Let's talk favorite SaaS tool. Like it could be for productivity, or it could just be to unwind. But maybe it's like an app or like a tool that you're using regularly. What's your go-to?
Favorite SaaS tool? I literally never think about what my favorite SaaS tool is.
It's just me.
I know. No. I should be thinking about it. Most recently, my favorite is my inbox organizer called Sanebox, I think. That has saved me so much time because I get so many emails, and it's allowed me to be so productive. So my inbox organizer is like my favorite right now.
I got another one, but it's just another. It's like, what's Greta's favorite thing? Like Greta's favorite Twitter feed or LinkedIn profile to, it could be around startups, it could be around tech, it could be around personal interest, but like, what's your go-to? You're like, every day I got to check this account.
I'm obsessed with Tanks, the influencer. I don't know if you know her.
Tanks, the influencer? No.
She's a Michigan magazine. She's kind of this like big sister vibes, probably like around my age, but she like was one of the first people to use one of those little tiny, microphones, and she speaks into it like this, and it's super sassy and gives like life advice for young women about like dating and self-worth and confidence. And I just like love her because she just says it like it is.
Wow, that's so cool.
Great one.
We gotta check it.
Yeah. We appreciate you joining us today so much. Thank
I
you.
wish I was there in person and give you two a hug. I appreciate it. It's great
be
to
so
it's
fun.
great to chat, and thanks for doing this podcast so that we can all learn from each other. And this journey as a founder is something many are compelled to start, but it's an undertaking. And so I love that you're building this resource for founders who are in those beginning stages, and hopefully you all can learn quicker and faster and better than I did, and enjoy the process, because I think that I built an app that I want to change people, and in the end this app and this company has really changed me, and that's it's a privilege, right, to be a founder.
Appreciate it.
Amazing.
Thanks, Greta. We'll catch you later.
Okay.
Thanks again for joining us on this episode, and make sure you subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're tuning in from. And while you're at it, drop us a like. And if this is the first time tuning in, make sure you subscribe to our Product Lab newsletter, which goes out every week and is chock full of tons of great stuff.